All right, hello everybody. We are here at Ignite again. This is another one of our Ignite Wire episodes. This is episode 155. I'm sitting here with CJ's with me again. We can do the show together today. And I'm sitting here with Taylor Brown. Taylor, how are you doing today?
Doing really good. Really good.
Awesome. So, Taylor, last time we talked to you was back in June, about 2 months ago, and it was all around Windows containers. We got a ton of really positive feedback from that episode. I know that a lot of the stuff you guys were doing really blew my mind. CJ and I got off the phone with you that day, and we were like, holy crap, this is awesome. So this is a really big week for you guys, right?
Yeah, no, this has been a huge week, right? Not only the GA of Windows Server, which is obviously really important and exciting for me and my team, as it's the first release of containers. It's real now. They get their hands on it. But all the work that we've been doing with Docker and being able to kind of highlight that as we expand our partnership and deliver some really key value to our customers around the joint solutions there.
Nice. What kind of feedback are you seeing from customers? I mean, is this stuff that it's like they're looking at it as being a lot of developers are saying, "Wow, this is brand new," or is it stuff that they feel like they've been like chomping at the bit, kind of watching what's going on with the tech previews and can't wait to get their hands on? We're the kind of customer that's like, it's not real until it hits GA. I'm going to stay away from the tech preview stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're finding at Ignite is it's probably 70% in the like, oh, this is new. They're excited about it because they see the possibilities. They haven't been chopping at the bit for containers per se, but they've been chopping at the bit for something that solves the problems that containers do.
Gotcha.
And that's what we're finding at the booth. And then there's the kind of the 30% that are like, yeah, we've been following this since Tech Preview 3, Tech Preview 4, Tech Preview 5, and like GA. And we kind of finished strong at GA. We got a lot of really key things that we added between Tech Preview 5 and GA. Our performance is almost twice as good as it was in Tech Preview 5 even.
Wow.
So the team has really been working really hard to deliver some pretty cool stuff.
Nice. So the first steps in terms of Windows container development, you got to have Windows Server 2016 GA, obviously. The latest bits, you can spin one of those up in Azure, as I understand it. You have to turn on a particular service, HyperV Container service. How does somebody get started with the GA bits?
Yeah. So you actually don't even have to have Server 2016. You can actually do all of our container development on Windows 10 anniversary update using our HyperV container technology. But certainly if you want to use Server 2016 eval bits, you can download those as an ISO. You'll be able to spin those up in Azure. And then from our documentation page, aka.ms/containers, we've got steps to kind of get you started. Those are actually going to be even easier next week. We're going to be adding a one-git provider, which is part of the new package management tool set in Server. So it'll literally get down to install-docker.
Wow, that really does simplify it. I saw a blog post by Docker yesterday, I think, where they had a really good. I think it was Michael Friss had the post where it was a really good kind of walkthrough and a little animated GIF of getting it up and running on Windows 10. So it's making it really easy. I think it's definitely going to help with adoption, get people to give it a shot.
Yeah, definitely. And we're working with Docker on Docker for Windows, which is the tools that they have for setting up Linux containers today. Already in beta and will be going out fairly soon. That same tool set will set you up for Windows containers. So right on the toolbar, you'll just be able to right-click and say Docker for Linux, Docker for Windows, choose between them. The Visual Studio tooling that we're building is going to plug into that as well. So as you're in Visual Studio, if you build something like a .NET Core app that can run on Linux or Windows, from that Visual Studio environment, you'll be able to build a Linux container and Windows container, compare the two.
That's really cool. One of the things that always, where Microsoft really stands out is its developer tooling and productivity. So it's really nice to see those sort of worlds coming together. You building your app in VS and being able to get it up and running in a container, nice and easy. Those I guess things smooth out that process for a dev and make it really simple and straightforward, and that'll be really cool.
Yeah, and some people picked this up in the keynote. I mean, the keynote was so packed full of stuff; it was almost hard to parse. But Debian did a really great demo of the Visual Studio tooling, going all the way through continuous build and delivery into the release management pipeline. To the extent that you check in a change, it builds the container, tests the container. When you're ready, you just hit go and it deploys the container, right? So kind of that whole process life cycle all the way through.
Yeah, it's nice because you've got customers that are out there today that are using their own kind of best of breed or build your own kind of tool chain with things like Travis and Circle or Jenkins, and using that to kind of, or even I guess how Docker Hub allows you to do that same kind of automated builds. But it's nice to see too that customers that are familiar with that, with like a TFS, where you've got the full Microsoft stack is giving you the full build tool chain to give you everything you need. You don't have to go grab all the different pieces. Notice those two little whale icons at the bottom there. It was definitely a new thing to see. It was nice to see those. So what other kind of stuff are you saying that you've done since the Tech Preview 5 that came out that's in GA now? I mean, the performance, that's 2 times performance, that's huge. But what other kind of stuff have you guys been working on in the last few months?
So one of the other really big ones is the ability to do some mixing and matching of the install options. So in Tech Preview 5, you had to run, if you wanted to run a Nano container, you had to run that on Nano Server. If you wanted to run a Server Core container, that was on Server Core. And we didn't have support for Server Core containers on Hyper-V. We've fixed all of that now. So now, if you've got a Server Core or you've got the full install of Server with GUI, you can run a Nano container on top of that. If you want to run a Server Core container using Hyper-V, you can. And so, what that really has done is it's made it's the easiest way to get Nano set up. Is literally you just say Docker run Microsoft/Nano server, done. Right, it's up and running. And so as we're helping people, realize the value of Nano Server, that smaller install of Windows, a couple hundred megs, reduced attack surface, reduced patch surface. This is a really, really great way for them to start testing their code in Nano Server, identifying any of the APIs that they need to tweak or change out for alternates, and get their app moved over to Nano Server. Right.
Gotcha.
And we're doing that on our own CI testing right now. So we have a whole CI test suite that runs against every change in Docker. As we're starting to move that over to Nano, we just finished a prototype of it. That prototype running in a Nano server reduced our costs by 50%. We were able to use a VM half the size of the VM that we were using before, and our tests finished faster.
Oh, God. So that's proof right there of what the benefit is. And is there any differentiation if you're a developer and you want to do this on Windows Server or Windows 10? I mean, that does all the stuff you just said applies to both of them?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So we can run Server Core containers on Windows 10 Anniversary Update. We can run Nano containers on Windows 10 Anniversary Update. So we're making that dev tooling super, super easy. And because we're using the Hyper-V containers, you're running the server kernel. So it's going to run exactly the same way on your dev box as it does in production.
That's very cool. Is there any? You're saying how you can get it up and running really quick using like Docker for Windows on the tool set that Docker gives you today, and there's a beta that allows you to switch between Windows or Docker. Is that just to clear it up for our listeners? That's something I'm definitely going to need to go get to be able to run the containers on the Windows 10 Anniversary Edition, or is that just an extra piece, or how does that kind of fit in?
Yeah, they've just made it easier, right? They've tooled around it so that you don't have to do any of the manual setup. You don't have to do, and even the manual setup's like 4 lines of PowerShell. They've just completed the kind of experience around it. Okay. Just made it really, really easy to get started, have that environment up and running, and build everything out.
So if I'm a developer, then I pop out my Surface Book. I can go download Docker for Windows as long as I've got Windows 10 Anniversary Edition installed, download Docker for Windows, which is I think less than 200 megs or something like that, install it, and then I can do the Hello World container right away.
Yep, that's the idea.
Exactly. Just like on a Mac, just like with the Linux stuff too. That's fantastic.
So I've got a quick question about Docker Hub. Right, lots of thousands of different types of containers and images, I guess, for want of a better word, up there. Have you had to do a bunch of work with Docker for Windows containers and Hub to help people find Windows images versus Linux images and the packaging format, things like that, to make sure that when somebody types in Docker run Microsoft yada, that it all comes down, or that people can search for the right images and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, this is an area that we still have some work to do, really. The image itself describes what platform it's built for, so the actual metadata of the image has that information in it. Right. But the Docker Hub doesn't have the right search capabilities that we want yet to really kind of zero in on that. So we're building that in right now. There's some work going on to make that an easier process, so you can say, you know what, I'm looking for images for Windows, gotcha, and be able to differentiate that. What we did do to try to make it a little easier is when you do a Docker search, you can specify the architecture from the command line. And if you try to pull a Linux image on a Windows host or a Windows image on a Linux host, we won't download the whole image and then tell you, oh, oops, sorry. We kind of head it off at the pass and say, wrong image for this.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah, I noticed that they have a basic search, right, but they don't have, filter by Windows or filter by Linux. But I also saw somebody at, I think it was at DockerCon, who did a talk on image packaging formats that can include both different architectures, and I guess at some point we may see the ability to have one image that contains the bits that are required for running it on Windows versus running it on Linux, and maybe this problem will eventually just go away and we'll have images that run anywhere.
Yeah, and that actually is the part of the longer term vision on it, is that the actual image itself is comprised of some metadata and then a set of layers. And that image metadata can say, I'm an image for both platforms or whatever, and here's my layers, and those layers can then describe themselves. So it's actually a pretty neat architecture in the sense that you've got multiple artifacts that can comprise it out, and I think we are going to see that. So we're already getting that with .NET images right now that can run on .NET Core images that can run on Linux or Windows. The Golang community has been really awesome. They've got an official image for Windows already. There's a Python image for Windows. This community has been phenomenal, right? They really have come around and helped us help our users, and ultimately help the joint community quite a bit.
Where do you see a lot of that community involvement coming from? Like you said, with Golang and Python building the images and contributing them that are based on Windows. Is that coming from the traditional Docker community, or is that coming from more like the traditional putting in air quotes, the traditional Microsoft community that is getting into containers? I guess is it the community, the Docker and the container community, opening open arms and bringing Microsoft in, or is it the Microsoft community kind of reaching in and saying we want to help out?
A lot of those ones are those communities coming to us.
That's
right?
Awesome.
So it's the Golang community. I didn't do anything; they just did it. Same thing with the Python community, which is we woke up one morning and it's oh, there's an image. That's awesome, right? We've got a new PM on my team who is actually going to be reaching out to a lot more of the communities though, and trying to understand that, can we help you? Do you need some help? Are you aware of this? And what kind of barriers might you be facing, so that we can kind of help accelerate some of that and build that community out, right? As we really join in that community even more and more, right? Microsoft is the #1 contributor to the Docker project outside of Docker Incorporated, which is a pretty awesome stat, one that I'm really proud of.
That one from our talk that we had back in June. That was one thing that really stood out to me, and not just so much that it was Microsoft was the biggest outside contributor to the Docker engine, but it was also that the people at Microsoft who were doing the contributions. It was coming from the core Windows OS, which that's core Windows OS working on open source software on a non-Windows technology and a language other than C++, and you're working. I'm assuming it's all done in Go. So it just, I was like, that's a different world.
It is a different world, but it's we're having so much success, and it's helping us. Yeah. We're learning how to do software in a different way. We're learning processes that other projects have been using, and we're bringing them inside now. So some of the success of the Docker project is all around how they do their continuous integration testing, and how do they ensure that changes from all over the world that are running 24/7, 365 don't break the project, and you can advance the project forward, right? So how do we bring that learning into our own environments and make it so that our developers can do that? How do we make it so that people can work remotely just as effectively as if they're in the office, right? Because the open source world does that. They do it so well. Why is it that I have to go to the office every morning? Or why is it that a developer has to move to the Redmond area if they are really happy in Brisbane, or if they're really happy in China, wherever they are? So how do we bring some of that in, right? So it's just good for both sides.
Yeah, so I guess it's a big milestone for you guys. You've done a lot of work, and it must be very rewarding to finally see it hit GA and get into people's hands where they can use it in production, I guess, for want of a better word. And it'll be very exciting certainly from my perspective. I'm living in the container world on the Linux side right now with Node and things like that. And I've started experimenting with Windows containers, and it's going to be really interesting to see that momentum start to pick up across the Microsoft dev world, and that I guess I'm waiting for that moment of enlightenment where people start only building their projects in containers, and that web deploy packages are a thing of the past.
And I think we're going to start to see that. I mean, that's what we're hearing at the show, is that people are they're super excited about it. They're ready to go back and start playing with it and start using it. We're ready to continue to innovate on it. We did a bunch of work to bring Active Directory into containers and start bringing some identity solutions in, things that even the Linux community hasn't had yet. And we're trying to do it in a way that we can bring them along with it, so that we can bring Active Directory identity for Linux containers as well, and kind of make that at least available, so that the Linux community can do a piece of that, and then it just works for both sides. We're thinking about other cool technology and innovation that we can bring into the mix. Microsoft has a million little tools. We're really, really good at building tools and then reassembling them into fantastic products. And so I'm now looking around at all the different tools we have, and how do we bring some of those into this world and really make it even a stronger experience.
Nice.
I've noticed that Microsoft projects have really started to adopt this whole container model a lot more as well. I mean, we're seeing things like some distributions of some projects now are coming out with, like, you can go download it, you can install it, you can do the OS install base that you like, but then, hey, it's also available as a container. Like, for example, I saw an announcement yesterday that the new Azure CLI came out, and that it's been redone in Python, which I was kind of expecting it to be .NET Core, but that was a bit of a shocker. But the easiest way to get a hold of it right now is to just pull the image straight down from Docker Hub, and you see those kinds of things that shows that Microsoft's embracing it. I'm curious, what you've seen internally and from how Microsoft is not just embracing containers, but they're saying, oh, we can leverage this for X, Y, Z, things that we weren't doing before. I mean, how much of that are you seeing people doing these days?
Well, kind of a two-part answer. Inside of Windows, we're using container technology for a bunch of things. And a lot of it's kind of under the covers. You don't see it as a container up front. So the Windows App Converter tool set, formerly Project Centennial, bringing your traditional Win32 apps into the store. That's all using containers under the covers.
I wondered about that, actually.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think I mentioned in our last talk, after the podcast recording had finished, I think I threw a sort of a side question to you, which was, universal Windows apps, when you go get them from the store, they're obviously isolated and things like that. That feels very containery, and we talked a little bit about that. So that's kind of cool that those Win32 apps and the isolation technology is using containers behind the scenes. Very interesting.
And then we're doing the same thing with the Windows Defender Application Guard that we talked about in the keynote, right? We're using containers as part of that. And similar to that kind of tool set, we took our container tool set and we used some of our remote desktop and our application remoting technologies, and then built some stuff into Edge to kind of complete that experience. So again, we're using containers for that. So inside of Windows, we're using it for a bunch of things. We're not using necessarily a Docker engine for all of those, because we're trying to make it a more seamless experience for a user. But then outside of Windows, we're seeing folks like the .NET team and the Azure CLI team embracing it. SQL is embracing containers heavily, right? Both for delivering their Linux container image as well as the Windows container image. And we've got a whole slew of teams that are kind of beating our door down to start talking to us about how they can deliver more of their apps as containers, as well as using them in Azure for their own services.
That's cool. I can immediately, you hear about Windows containers, the first one, the one app that is always tough to go through and stand up and install, it's back from our history a bunch, is I think SharePoint. It's like, look, can I put SharePoint in a container to make it a heck of a lot easier to do local dev when you want to do on-prem dev, when you want to do stuff locally, and that's developers have always had to spin up multiple VMs on their laptop, and I ran across somebody yesterday and they were asking, is this something that could help me with SharePoint development? I'm like, so what are you thinking? They're like, well, I've got 3 VMs that are running on my Surface Pro 4. Like, that's a bit of an overkill. I'm not so sure I want to go in that direction, but I guess they said, well, it works. I'm like, I would think that, yes, this could potentially help you quite a bit.
Yeah, and actually the SharePoint team, almost a year ago, approached us and said, hey, for our own team, doing our own development internally and doing unit testing and stuff, can we start using containers? And at that point, our answer was, well, we're not quite ready for that yet. SharePoint's a little bit of a harder one. We've got this Active Directory stuff we got to figure out how to do. can you come back in about a year? And so we're actually at a point now where we can go retouch with them now that we've got the Active Directory support working and some of that in there to start figuring out, hey, can we do that?
So is that effectively domain joining a container?
It's better than that.
Better than that?
Yeah. So we're actually using group managed service accounts, and we're mapping that to the machine account at startup time.
I see.
So the container image doesn't have any credentials in it. It doesn't have any identity at all in it. And at startup time, we pass it a credential spec file, which is a SID and some mapping, and it uses that to start the container as that account.
Gotcha. So it's almost like the concept of having a private key store somewhere else, right? It's not got anything in it. There's no config, and that comes in at runtime. What's next on the cards for containers around Windows? What direction are you heading? I guess you're still busy. You're not done with working, I guess. So what should we expect to see over the next wee while for Windows containers?
Yeah, in general, Windows is moving into a much more agile development model. We've seen that in Windows 10 already. We go through the insider builds. We ship on a very regular cadence. Server's moving into that as well. So our goal is to ship Nano Server 2 to 3 times a year, which allows us to be a lot more agile and continue to add a lot of value into containers. So we're going to be continuing to look at startup time, density, performance. Those are key tenets for us. But we're also going to be looking at the areas we can add unique value. We're hearing from customers the security story is really, really valuable. How can we double down on that? How can we help them be even more successful with that? How can we make it even easier to do development? We're going to be looking for people to give us feedback on it. So through user voice, through the Windows Insider Feedback Hub, those kind of experiences, those are awesome ways to give us feedback. Certainly they can tweet at me, TaylorB_Microsoft, or MSFT. They can talk to us on our forums. So we're really looking for that feedback on what are the areas that we can really add some key value to people.
Very cool.
Awesome. So and we'll make sure that we put your contact information in the show notes as well, so people can get a hold of it too. And I don't know if our listeners probably can tell, we've been invaded by a bunch of the staff at the conference center, and so things just got pretty loud right in our area. So sorry for all the background noise. We're doing our best here. So let me ask you: is there anything else that you would like to just, any call to action that you'd like to have for people? Anything they'd like to check out? Where should they go to first try and dive into this to give it a shot?
Yeah, our big call to action this week is get out and try an app. Take one web app, take one app in your environment and put it in a container. Right? If you're not hooked after that, hey, all right, But at least for me, I was hooked. Yeah. Right? It was like one time, it was like, this is so cool, right? And so the best place to get started is aka.ms/containers. That'll point you off to our documentation. We've got a nice little getting started experience on there. Pull down, you can run Nano Man, and you've got a little Nano guy. You're all set up and ready to go in a few minutes. And then it's just, get started, right?
I want to echo that too. I think that the one thing that got me when I first played with this, and granted this is going back to the Linux containers, was that I was in a hotel room, so I had kind of a crappy Wi-Fi connection. I didn't have anything installed on my machine. This is back before Docker for Mac or Docker for Windows was even available. And I was still surprised in the amount of time it took me to download everything. Within 25 minutes, I not only was running Hello World, but I was also having a simple little JavaScript file getting executed, adding a bunch, doing npm install, and grabbing a bunch of stuff in it. It really, people who are listening to this, if you want to give it a shot, we were talking, CJ and I were interviewing somebody yesterday, and they were like, is it something that I can actually bite off and really get my arms around over the course of a weekend? I was like, I honest to God think that you could get up and over breakfast, read a little bit, and by lunchtime, you've actually got you're not going to build a complex application, but if you can go through and do like a little Hello World console app, or you can do a Hello World web app that just takes in a sample of a form, this stuff does not take that long to get up and running. It's not that much of a mind shift. It's just when you see it run the first time, it really opens up a lot of possibilities. It feels like a lot of walls get broken down, or you get to put these walls up and kind of let these things run without being so integrated with everything else around them. It really does make it an easier way, I think, to do development, and it's not that far of a reach.
It really is it's an empowering experience in a lot of ways, right? It's like the first time you went to a gallery on Azure or AWS or something, and like, oh, I can just get a VM that easily.
Yeah.
It's kind of that feeling of like, oh wow, I don't actually have to install this by hand, and it's kind of that aha moment.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Taylor, hey, thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with us. I'm sure our listeners are going to find this real interesting. And like I said, we'll have your contact info on the page. And also aka.ms/containers is a place where people should go to learn about Windows containers this week.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much.